The air changed first. That's what I remember most about our arrival at Stillwater Gap. One moment, we were driving along the winding mountain road, car windows down, Kate's playlist filling the space between us with indie folk that matched the autumn scenery. The next moment, the air thickened. I can't explain it better than that. It pressed against my skin like a living thing, curious and cold. "Did you feel that?" I asked, glancing at Kate. She was staring out the window, her camera forgotten in her lap. "Yeah." She rolled up her window in one swift motion, like walking into a freezer. We'd been planning this trip for months. The remote campsite in the Appalachians had been Kate's find. A photographer's dream, she'd said, with its untouched forests and mirror-like lake tucked away from the usual tourist trails. Stillwater Gap wasn't even on most maps. We'd found the location through an obscure outdoor forum Kate frequented. The narrow dirt road ended at a small clearing where a wooden sign marked the trailhead. Stillwater Gap, 3 miles. No other cars were parked there. "Perfect," Kate said, already grabbing her backpack from the trunk. "We'll have the whole place to ourselves." I should have seen it as a warning. Nobody else was here, despite the perfect October weather. But I was too caught up in Kate's excitement to question it. We hiked for nearly 2 hours, deeper into woods that grew increasingly dense. The forest canopy filtered the sunlight into thin, hazy beams that barely reached the forest floor. Strange, considering it was early afternoon. When we finally reached the campsite, the lake stretched before us like black glass, surrounded by ancient pines and maples dressed in fire-red leaves. The beauty was undeniable, but something felt wrong. The silence was absolute. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Just stillness. "Listen," Kate whispered. "I don't hear anything." Exactly. We found a flat area near the shore to set up our tent. As I hammered in the stakes, something glinted between 2 rocks. I reached down and pulled out a small metal box, roughly the size of a cigarette pack. It was surprisingly heavy, with intricate engravings along its surface that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. "Kate, check this out." She took it from me, turning it over in her hands. "It's beautiful, like an antique puzzle box." After a minute of examination, she found a hidden catch. The lid opened with a soft click. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed paper, folded neatly. Kate unfolded it, and we both leaned in to read the cramped, handwritten text. Rules for visitors to Stillwater. Gap Rule 1, set up camp before sunset. Once night falls, remain in your tent until dawn. Rule 2, do not swim in the lake. Do not touch the water. If rain falls, seek shelter immediately. Rule 3, if you hear your name called, do not answer unless you can see who is calling. Rule 4, leave an offering at the base of the largest pine tree before sleeping. Rule 5, if you hear music, follow it only during daylight hours. Rule 6, count your breaths when the fog comes. Stop only when it recedes. Rule 7, if you find additional rules, follow them without question. At the bottom, a final line was written in different ink, the handwriting shaky and urgent. These rules keep you safe. I'm sorry I didn't follow them. This is someone's idea of a joke, right? I said, laughing nervously. Probably left by some campers trying to scare the next group. Kate didn't laugh. She was staring at the lake, her expression troubled. "Kate?" "The trees," she said softly. "Look at their reflection." I glanced at the water. The trees reflected perfectly on the glass-like surface, but something was wrong. The reflections didn't match the trees standing above them. In the water, they were twisted, bent at impossible angles, their branches reaching like grasping horns. And they were moving, though not a single leaf stirred in the real world above. "We should go," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "Pack up and find another spot." Kate folded the paper and put it back in the box. "It's already past 4. We'd be hiking back in the dark." She hesitated, then handed me the box. "Maybe we should just follow the rules, to be safe." As she said it, the sun slipped behind a cloud, and I felt the woods grow darker around us. In the distance, something that might have been a bird call echoed across the lake. It almost sounded like a name. "Let's just finish setting up camp," Kate said, her voice steady despite the tension I felt radiating from her. "Rule 1, right? Set up before sunset." I nodded, trying to shake off the crawling sensation between my shoulder blades. The feeling of being watched had settled over me like a physical weight. We worked in silence, methodically assembling our tent and arranging our gear. I kept glancing at the lake, unable to look away from those wrong reflections. The trees in the water seemed to lean toward our campsite, though their real counterparts stood motionless. "Don't stare at it too long," Kate murmured, touching my arm. I flinched. She'd moved so silently across the pine needles. The sun was sinking rapidly now, bleeding orange light through the trees. Shadows stretched across the clearing, long fingers reaching for our tent. I checked my watch. 5:47 p.m. We had maybe 30 minutes of daylight left. "What should we leave as an offering?" I asked, unfolding our camping chairs. Kate rummaged through her backpack. "I've got granola bars, trail mix, some jerky." "Not food," I said, surprising myself. "That feels wrong." She looked up, her face half in shadow. "What then?" I thought about it, then pulled out my pocket knife. It had been my father's, the handle worn smooth from years of use. Something personal. Kate nodded slowly. "I'll give this." She removed a thin silver bracelet from her wrist, one I'd never seen her without. "My grandmother gave it to me before she died." "Are we seriously doing this?" I asked, even as I placed my knife and her bracelet in my palm. "Following rules from a random note? Better safe than sorry," she replied, her eyes darting to the darkening woods. Together we walked to the largest pine at the edge of our clearing. Its trunk was massive, the bark deeply furrowed and blackened in places, as if it had survived a lightning strike. I placed the items at its base, nestled between two gnarled roots that resembled knuckles of a half-buried hand. As I straightened up, a cold breeze whispered through the clearing, rustling the leaves, the first sound we'd heard from the forest since our arrival. Kate shivered beside me. "There," she said. "Rule 4 taken care of." Back at camp, we lit our portable stove and made a simple dinner of instant noodles. Neither of us had much appetite. The silence had returned, heavier than before. No crickets, no owls, no rustling of nocturnal creatures emerging. Just the occasional crackle from our battery-powered lantern. "We should get inside the tent," I said as the last light faded from the sky. "First rule, remember?" Kate nodded, gathering our dishes with hands that trembled slightly. "Do you think—" She stopped mid-sentence, her head tilting. "What?" I asked, my pulse quickening. I thought I heard. She trailed off, staring into the darkness beyond our campsite. I listened intently, but heard nothing. What did it sound like? Like singing. Very faint. She shook her head. "It's gone now." I remembered Rule 5. If you hear music, follow it only during daylight hours. "If you hear it again, tell me, but we're not following anything tonight," I said firmly, guiding her toward the tent. "Come on." We zipped ourselves inside and arranged our sleeping bags. The tent's thin walls suddenly seemed absurdly inadequate protection from whatever might lurk in the darkness. I placed the metal box with the rules beside my pillow, within easy reach. Maybe we should take turns keeping watch, Kate suggested, her voice small. The rule says to stay in the tent until dawn, I reminded her, not to stay awake. She nodded reluctantly and nestled into her sleeping bag. I switched off the lantern, plunging us into darkness. For a long time, we lay there listening to each other breathe. Sleep seemed impossible. Every creak of a branch, every whisper of wind sounded magnified. Sinister. "Ryan?" Kate whispered finally. "Yeah?" "Your knife and my bracelet. They're gone, aren't they? The ones we left at the tree." I hadn't considered checking before we'd retreated to the tent. "I guess we'll find out in the morning." The silence stretched between us until Kate's breathing slowed into the rhythm of sleep. I envied her that release. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. I must have dozed eventually because I jerked awake sometime later, disoriented. The inside of the tent was pitch black. My watch read 3:17 a.m. What had woken me? I lay perfectly still, straining to hear. At first, there was nothing but Kate's soft breathing beside me. Then I caught it, a sound from outside, near the lake. Splashing. Gentle, rhythmic splashing, like someone wading slowly through shallow water. Rule 2. Do not swim in the lake. Do not touch the water. The splashing stopped. In the new silence, I heard something else. Footsteps. Wet, slopping footsteps approaching our tent. They stopped just outside the thin fabric wall by my head. Water dripped, pattering on the ground. "Ryan," a voice called softly. My name, in Kate's voice. I turned to look at her sleeping form beside me, then back at the tent wall. "Ryan," the voice called again. "I need your help. Please come out." I held my breath, remembering Rule 3. If you hear your name called, do not answer unless you can see who is calling. The wet thing outside the tent waited, dripping. I could smell lake water now, but underneath it was something else, something rotten and old. "Ryan," it said again, Kate's voice distorting slightly, stretching the syllables. "Why won't you help me?" I clenched my teeth, fighting the urge to respond, to demand what it was. Beside me, Kate stirred in her sleep, mumbling something. The thing outside moved again, circling the tent. Wet footsteps squishing in the dirt. I heard it pause at the tent entrance. The zipper twitched. The zipper moved up an inch, then stopped. I lay frozen, barely breathing, my eyes fixed on that small gap at the bottom of the tent entrance. Water pooled there, seeping in, not clear but dark, viscous, with the faint gleam of oil. A finger, pale and bloated, curled around the edge of the opening. "Ryan," the thing whispered, Kate's voice slipping like a badly fitted mask. "I'm so cold. Please let me in." The real Kate stirred beside me. I reached out and squeezed her arm in warning, my eyes never leaving the zipper. She woke instantly, a sharp intake of breath the only sound she made. The finger at the tent entrance twitched, knuckles bending the wrong way. Kate saw it too. She gripped my hand so tightly, I felt my bones grind together. We watched in silent horror as the digit probed blindly, seeking purchase on the zipper. "I can hear you breathing," said the thing outside, its voice no longer just Kate's, but a chorus of whispers. "I know you're awake. Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." With each repetition, its voice degraded further, becoming wet and gurgling, like speech through flooded lungs. The finger withdrew suddenly, and we heard the wet slapping of footsteps retreating toward the lake. Kate let out a shuddering breath. "What the fuck was that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know." My mouth felt like sandpaper. But I think we just found out why Rule 2 exists. We sat in tense silence, backs against our backpacks, listening to the night. Neither of us suggested looking outside. Rule 1 was clear: stay in the tent until dawn. "Your knife," Kate said suddenly. "The one you left at the tree. Where did you keep it before?" "Side pocket of my backpack." "Why?" She pointed with a trembling finger. "Look." I followed her gaze to my backpack and felt my stomach drop. The pocket was open, and sticking out was the worn wooden handle of my father's knife. "That's not possible," I said, reaching for it. The handle was wet and cold to the touch. When I fully withdrew the knife, lake water dripped from the blade, leaving dark stains on my sleeping bag. Kate showed me her wrist. The silver bracelet we'd left as an offering gleamed there, water beading on its surface. "Our offerings were returned," she said, her voice unsteady. "I don't think that's a good sign." Before I could respond, a sound cut through the night. A low, mournful tone, like someone blowing across the mouth of a giant bottle. It reverberated through the clearing, setting my teeth on edge. With the sound came a change in the air. It grew dense, difficult to breathe. Through the tent walls I saw a glow, not the warm light of dawn, but a sickly, diffuse luminescence. "The fog," Kate whispered. "Rule 6. Count your breaths when the fog comes. Stop only when it recedes." The glowing mist seeped through the tent fabric like it was nothing more substantial than gauze. It curled around our ankles, cold and damp, smelling of stagnant water and decay. "Start counting," I said, taking a deep breath. 1. Kate joined me. 2. 3. We counted in alternating numbers, our voices a fragile shield against the encroaching fog. It rose higher, reaching our waists, then our chests. The chill penetrated to my bones. Each breath became labored, as if I were inhaling liquid instead of air. 27, Kate rasped. 28, I forced out. The fog reached our necks, our chins. I tilted my head back, desperate to keep my mouth above the misty surface. Though logically, I knew it was flowing into my lungs with every breath. 34, 35. Kate's voice was growing fainter. I reached for her hand through the fog but couldn't find it. I couldn't see her anymore, though she was less than 2 feet away. "Kate?" I called, panic rising. "Don't stop counting," she gasped. 38. 39, I continued, fighting the urge to scream as the fog filled my mouth, crawled up my nostrils, seeped into my ears. Through the roaring in my head, I heard Kate still counting, her voice growing more distant with each number. 46, I choked, uncertain if I was even making sound anymore. Images began to form in the fog, faces I didn't recognize, contorted in silent screams. Places I'd never seen, a wooden cabin with black windows, a dock extending into churning waters, a circle of stones with something dark and formless, writhing at its center. 53, Kate called, her voice seeming to come from miles away now. I tried to respond but couldn't find my voice. The fog filled every part of me, replacing blood and breath with its cold essence. I was dissolving, becoming one with the mist. Somewhere in the distance, Kate was still counting. I clung to the sound like a lifeline. 62, 63. Suddenly, the bottle-like tone sounded again, and the fog began to recede. It withdrew from my mouth, my throat, my lungs, leaving me gasping and retching on all fours. As it sank back through the tent floor, the visions faded, leaving only impressions like the memory of a nightmare. 70. Kate whispered beside me, completing her count. I looked at her in the dim light. Her face was bone white, lips blue with cold. Dark water dripped from her hair, though it had been dry before the fog came. "Are you okay?" I asked, reaching for her. She flinched away. "Don't," she said hoarsely. I need to be sure it's really you. I withdrew my hand, understanding her fear all too well. What did you see in the fog? She shook her head, jaw clenched. Things I can't describe. People. No, not people. Things wearing people-like clothes. She looked at me with haunted eyes. This place. I don't think it's just haunted or cursed. I think it's something else entirely. Outside, birds began to chirp, the first natural sounds we'd heard since arriving. Dawn was approaching. We'd survive the night. Kate reached for her phone. No signal, of course. She let out a hollow laugh. Not that I expected any. We should leave at first light, I said. Rules or no rules? She nodded, but without conviction. What if we can't? What if that's not an option anymore? I had no answer for her. We both knew the rules implied a trap, one we'd walked into willingly, eyes wide open. As the first pale light seeped through the tent walls, a new sound broke the dawn chorus, something scratching on the ground outside. Hesitantly, I unzipped the tent a few inches and peered out. The dirt before our tent was disturbed, as if raked by enormous claws. In the fresh furrows, something gleamed. I reached out cautiously and picked it up. It was another metal box, identical to the first. I brought the box inside the tent, my hands trembling slightly. It was identical to the first. Same weight, same shifting engravings that seemed to rearrange themselves when viewed from the corner of my eye. Should we open it? I asked. Kate stared at it, her face taut with exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Rule 7, she said flatly. If you find additional rules, follow them without question. Does that mean we have to open it, or is that implied? She rubbed her temples. I don't think we have a choice. Whatever's happening here, it's plain by its own logic. I found the hidden catch just as Kate had with the first box. It opened with the same soft click. Inside was another yellowed paper, folded even more precisely than the first. My hands shook as I unfolded it, revealing the same cramped handwriting. Additional rules for visitors who remain at Stillwater Gap. The reflections in the lake show what was, not what is. Do not try to match them. When birds fall silent during daylight, find the hollow tree and shelter within until they sing again. If you find a child's toy, leave it exactly as it was. They are not lost. They are placed. The path you arrived on will not be the same when you try to leave. Mark your way with stones only. At exactly noon, face the mountains and recite your full name 3 times. Hide your face until the echo returns. There are others here. Some were once like you. Acknowledge them only if they speak to you first. If blood appears on your skin, map its pattern before washing it away. The pattern is a message. At the bottom, in that different, desperate hand, you have been claimed. I'm so sorry. Jesus, I muttered, passing the paper to Kate. This is getting worse. She read it silently, her face paling further with each line. When she finished, she carefully folded the paper and placed it back in the box. We need to leave, she said, her voice steadier than I expected. Now, while it's daylight. I nodded, relieved she'd come to the same conclusion. Let's pack up and get out of here. We moved with urgent efficiency, breaking down the tent and stuffing our gear into our backpacks. The forest around us seemed benign in the morning light. Birds flitted between branches. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves. It was almost possible to believe that the horrors of the night had been a shared hallucination. But the dark stains on my sleeping bag, where lake water had dripped from my knife, were all too real. And Kate kept touching her returned bracelet, as if to reassure herself it was still there. Ready? I asked, shouldering my pack. She nodded, scanning the trees. Which way did we come in? I pointed confidently toward a gap in the trees to the west. That way. I remember that split tree from yesterday. Kate frowned. I thought we came from there. She pointed south. See those 3 pines in a row? We passed those on the way in. I stared in the direction she indicated. 3 tall pines stood in a neat line, their trunks perfectly spaced. I had no memory of them from yesterday. That's not right, I said slowly. I specifically remember that split trunk. We both looked around the clearing, suddenly uncertain. The trees seemed to have multiplied overnight, closing in on the campsite. The paths that had been clear yesterday were now choked with underbrush. Rule 4, Kate whispered. The path you arrived on will not be the same when you try to leave. Mark your way with stones only. My stomach sank. You think these rules, they're not just warnings. They're predictions? She didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. Instead, she knelt and began gathering small stones, placing them in her jacket pocket. Let's try your way first, she said, nodding toward the split tree. We'll mark our path as we go. We set out, Kate dropping stones at regular intervals to mark our trail. The forest grew denser as we walked, the trees pressing closer together, their branches intertwining overhead to filter out the sunlight. The temperature dropped noticeably. After 20 minutes of hiking, we should have reached the main trail. Instead, we found ourselves at the edge of a small clearing we'd never seen before. In the center stood a weathered wooden cabin, its windows dark, empty sockets. This wasn't here yesterday, I said unnecessarily. Kate pulled out her phone and checked the GPS again. No signal, but the compass was working. We've been heading west, just like you said. Let's try a different direction, I suggested, trying to mask my growing unease. We retreated to our stone trail and followed it back to the campsite. The lake waited, still and black. The trees reflected in its surface were different now, withered and skeletal, though their counterparts above stood green and full. The reflections in the lake show what was, not what is. Do not try to match them. Kate selected a different direction, northeast this time, and we began again, marking our way with stones. This path seemed more promising at first. The underbrush was thinner, the way clearer. But after 30 minutes of hiking, the birdsong around us suddenly stopped. We froze, looking at each other in alarm. When birds fall silent during daylight, find the hollow tree and shelter within until they sing again. Hollow tree, Kate muttered, scanning our surroundings. Look for a hollow tree. I spotted it first, a massive old oak with a gaping wound in its trunk, large enough for a person to stand inside. We hurried toward it, the silence of the forest pressing against our ears like cotton wool. After you, I said, gesturing to the opening. Kate hesitated, then ducked inside. I followed, squeezing into the tight space beside her. The interior of the tree was surprisingly dry and smooth, as if it had been hollowed out deliberately. The wood was warm against my back, almost unnaturally so. Now we wait, Kate whispered. Through the opening, I watched the forest. Nothing moved. Not a leaf stirred. The world outside seemed frozen in a moment of suspended animation. Then I saw it. A figure at the edge of my vision, standing between 2 distant trees. Human-shaped but wrong somehow, its proportions subtly off. There's something out there, I whispered. Kate's fingers dug into my arm. Don't stare at it. Rule 6. I forced my gaze away, focusing instead on the ground at the base of the tree. There, half buried in the leaves, was a small object. A child's doll, ancient and weathered, its porcelain face cracked, its dress rotted to threads, If you find a child's toy, leave it exactly as it was. They are not lost. They are placed. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to kick it away from our shelter. Minutes stretched by in tense silence. I was acutely aware of Kate's breathing beside me, of the unnatural warmth emanating from the wood at our backs, of the figure that remained motionless in my peripheral vision. "Ryan," Kate whispered suddenly, her voice tight with fear. "Look at your arm." I glanced down and felt my heart stutter. A line of blood had appeared on my forearm, seeping through my sleeve, though there was no pain, no wound beneath. As I watched, the blood moved, tracing a pattern on my skin like an invisible finger drawing with crimson ink. If blood appears on your skin, map its pattern before washing it away. The pattern is a message. Kate fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a small notebook and pen. With shaking hands, she sketched the design forming on my arm, a series of interconnected symbols I didn't recognize. They reminded me of the shifting engravings on the metal boxes, but more defined, more deliberate. The blood completed its message, then began to dry, flaking away to reveal unmarked skin beneath. In the distance, a single bird chirped tentatively. Then another joined it, and another, until the forest was alive with sound once more. "We can go now," Kate said, tucking away her notebook. As we squeezed out of the hollow tree, I looked back at where I had seen the figure. Nothing was there now, but on the ground the child's doll had moved. It now sat upright, its cracked face turned directly toward us. "Don't look at it," Kate said, grabbing my hand. "Come on." We followed our stone trail back to the campsite in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. It was becoming increasingly clear that leaving Stillwater Gap wouldn't be as simple as hiking out the way we came in. The sun was high overhead now, approaching noon. Kate checked her watch. "It's 11:54, she said. "Rule 5. At exactly noon, face the mountains and recite your full name 3 times. Hide your face until the echo returns." We stood at the edge of the lake, looking toward the mountains that loomed beyond it. Their peaks were shrouded in clouds, dark and forbidding. "I'm scared, Ryan," Kate admitted, her voice small. I took her hand, feeling the same fear coursing through me. "Me too. But we'll figure this out. We'll follow the rules and find a way out." My watch beeped, signaling noon. Together, we turned to face the mountains. "Ryan Michael Cooper," I said 3 times, my voice echoing across the water. "Catherine Elizabeth Shaw." Kate followed, her words joining mine in the vast emptiness. We covered our faces with our hands and waited for the echo to return. We stood with our faces covered, the seconds stretching into minutes. The forest had gone silent again. No birds, no insects, not even the whisper of wind through leaves. Just the sound of our breathing, shallow and quick. Then it came. The echo returned, but it wasn't our voices. What bounced back from the mountains was a chorus of whispers, layered and distorted, speaking our names with terrible intimacy. "Ryan Michael Cooper," they hissed, the syllables stretched and warped. "Catherine Elizabeth Shaw." The voices seemed to circle us, coming from the trees, the lake, the ground beneath our feet. I fought the urge to uncover my eyes, to see what was speaking. "Don't look," Kate whispered beside me. "Not until it stops." The whispers grew louder, more insistent, multiplying until it sounded like hundreds of voices were calling to us. They knew us now. They had our names. And then, abruptly, silence fell again. "Is it over?" I asked, still covering my face. Before Kate could answer, a single voice spoke directly behind us, clear, human, and terrifyingly close. "You can look now. They've gone." I whirled around, dropping my hands, A man stood at the edge of the trees, watching us with tired eyes. He was gaunt, his clothes dirty and worn, his beard wild and unkempt, but he was undeniably human. "Who are you?" Kate demanded, grabbing my arm. The man smiled faintly. "A visitor. Like you." He gestured to the lake. "I've been here. A while." "How long?" I asked, studying him more carefully. His clothes were oddly dated, the kind of hiking gear popular maybe 15 or 20 years ago. He shrugged. I stopped counting after the first year. Kate's grip on my arm tightened. "A year? You've been trapped here for a year?" "At least." He glanced at the sky, then back at us. "Name's Daniel. You must be Ryan and Catherine." At our alarmed expressions, he added, "I heard you call out your names." "The noon ritual." "Rule 5, I said." Daniel nodded. "You found the rules. Good. They'll keep you alive, at least." He took a step closer, then stopped when we both tensed. "I'm not one of them, if that's what you're worried about. Rule 6 says you can talk to me if I speak first. There are others here. Some were once like you. Acknowledge them only if they speak to you first." "How many others are there?" Kate asked. Daniel's gaze drifted to the lake. "Now, just me, as far as I know. There were 4 of us once. The others..." He trailed off, his expression clouding. "They broke the rules." A chill ran down my spine. "What happens if you break the rules?" "Depends which one." Daniel's voice was matter-of-fact, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Break Rule 2, you'll be taken into the lake. Break Rule 3, something will wear your face for a while. Break Rule 1, dot." He shuddered. "Don't break Rule 1. Kate pulled out her notebook. "We followed Rule 7 this morning, mapped a blood pattern that appeared on Ryan's arm." She showed him the drawing. "Do you know what it means?" Daniel studied it, his brow furrowing. "It's a name, not yours." He pointed to one of the symbols. "This here. It's how they write vessel or container. And these connected marks? A binding." "A binding?" I echoed. "What does that mean?" "It means they've chosen you for something." His eyes met mine, full of grim understanding. "They always choose one. The box finds you, and then they choose." My throat went dry. "Choose me for what?" Daniel just shook his head. "You'll find out soon enough." He glanced at the sky again. "It's getting late. You should return to your camp before sunset. Rule 1. "Wait," Kate said as he turned to leave. "How do we get out of here?" "We tried following different paths, but they just led us in circles." Daniel paused. "The way out..." He seemed to be weighing his words carefully. "It's not a path. It's a price." "What does that mean?" I demanded. "It means Stillwater Gap keeps what it claims." His eyes lingered on me. "Sometimes it keeps all, sometimes just part." With that cryptic statement, he retreated into the trees. We called after him, but he didn't look back, disappearing into the shadows as if he'd never been there at all. "Well, that was supremely unhelpful," Kate muttered, but her voice shook. I checked my watch. 2:37 p.m. We've still got a few hours of daylight. Let's try to find another way out. This time we headed southeast, dropping stones to mark our path. We walked for nearly an hour, the terrain gradually becoming rockier, the trees thinning out. Hope stirred in my chest when I spotted what looked like a wider trail ahead. But as we approached, Kate suddenly froze. "Do you hear that?" I listened. Faint but unmistakable, music drifted through the trees. A simple, haunting melody played on what sounded like a flute or pipe. Rule 5. If you hear music, follow it only during daylight hours. "Should we?" I asked, glancing at the sun. still high enough to be safe. Kate's expression was torn between fear and hope. The rules haven't steered us wrong yet. Maybe it's a way out. We followed the ghostly tune, veering off our stone-marked path and deeper into unknown territory. The music led us up a steep incline, over a ridge of tumbled boulders, and down into a small, secluded valley. In the center of the valley stood a circle of standing stones, 7 tall monoliths arranged in a perfect ring. The music emanated from within the circle, though there was no visible source. "I don't like this," Kate whispered. I didn't either, but something compelled me forward. As I approached the stone circle, the music grew louder, more enticing. I could almost make out words within the melody, though not in any language I recognized. "Ryan, wait!" Kate called, but her voice seemed distant, unimportant compared to the music's call. I stepped between 2 of the monoliths, entering the circle. The music surrounded me, filled me. In the center of the ring was a small stone altar, and on it lay a bone flute, its surface yellowed with age and intricately carved with the same symbols that had appeared in blood on my arm. Without conscious thought, I reached for it. "Don't touch that!" The shout broke through my trance. Daniel came running into the valley, his face contorted with panic. "Get out of the circle! Now!" I stumbled backward, the spell broken. As I retreated, the music changed, shifting from enticing to threatening, a discordant wail that made my teeth ache. "Run!" Daniel yelled, grabbing Kate's arm and pulling her back toward the ridge. I sprinted after them, the inhuman music rising to a shriek behind me. As we scrambled over the rocky ridge, I glanced back. The standing stones were vibrating, blurring at the edges as if reality itself was coming undone around them. We didn't stop running until we reached the lakeshore, all 3 of us gasping for breath. The campsite was just as we'd left it, our gear undisturbed. "What the hell was that?" I demanded when I could speak again. Daniel sagged against the tree, his face ashen. A trap. One of their many traps. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. "But it wanted you specifically. It called to you." "Why me?" He gestured vaguely at my arm where the blood symbols had appeared. "Because you've been marked. You're the vessel." He straightened up, his expression hardening. "Listen to me carefully. There's a ritual tonight, at midnight. They'll try to complete what they've started." "What ritual?" Kate asked, her voice rising. "What are they trying to do to him?" Daniel's eyes darted to the lake, then back to us. "They need bodies, to cross over, to walk in our world." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The thing in the lake, the old thing, it's been gathering strength for centuries, but it needs anchors, physical forms to manifest fully. And I'm supposed to be one of these anchors? The blood marking is the first step. The music was the second. If you'd touched that flute..." He shook his head. "The final step happens at midnight." "How do you know all this?" Kate asked suspiciously. A shadow crossed Daniel's face. "Because I was marked too, once. But they took someone else instead. My brother." His voice cracked. "I've been trapped here ever since, watching, learning their patterns, trying to find a way to free him." The sun was sinking lower now, the shadows lengthening across the clearing. "We need to prepare," Daniel said, glancing nervously at the darkening sky. "They'll be stronger tonight than ever before." "Why?" I asked. "Because tonight is Samhain," he replied. "What some call Halloween. The night when the veil between worlds is thinnest." Kate and I exchanged horrified glances. In all the terror and confusion, we'd lost track of the date, but he was right. It was October 31st. "Get to your tent before sunset," Daniel said urgently. "Salt the perimeter if you have any. I'll come for you before midnight." "Where are you going?" Kate called as he backed away. "To get what we need to fight them." His eyes met mine one last time, filled with grim determination. "Remember, Ryan, don't answer if they call your name, no matter whose voice they use." As Daniel disappeared once more into the forest, the sun touched the tops of the mountains. Night was coming, and with it, the ritual that would try to claim me as its vessel. Kate grabbed my hand, her palm slick with fear sweat. "I'm not letting them take you," she said fiercely. I wished I shared her confidence. The blood marking, the music's call, the thing in the lake that had returned our offerings, it all pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. Stillwater Gap had already decided my fate, and as the last light faded from the sky, I wondered if any rule could save me from what was coming at midnight. "We need to salt the perimeter," Kate said, rummaging through our food supplies. Daniel said. "I know what Daniel said," I interrupted, more sharply than I intended. "But how do we know we can trust him? He appears out of nowhere with convenient knowledge about everything that's happening, claims he's been here for years." Kate paused, a small container of table salt in her hand. "What choice do we have? He knows this place, Ryan. He knows the rules." I ran my hands through my hair, frustration and fear making my thoughts jumbled. What if he's one of them? What if this is all part of the trap? If he wanted to hurt us, he could have let you touch that flute. Kate began pouring a thin line of salt around our tent. It wasn't much, just a small camping container meant for seasoning food. But it was something. Besides, he spoke to us first, like Rule 6 says. She had a point. Still, something about Daniel nagged at me. How convenient that he'd appeared right after the noon ritual, that he knew about the blood marking, that he'd shown up at the stone circle just in time. Night had fully descended now. The darkness outside our small circle of lantern light, absolute. No moon. No stars penetrated the thick canopy above. We'd retreated to our tent as instructed. The thin walls, once again, our only barrier against whatever lurked in the darkness. "I've been thinking about what Daniel said." Kate spoke softly as she completed the salt circle. "About Stillwater Gap keeping what it claims." "What about it?" She met my eyes, her expression somber. "What if the price for leaving is someone staying behind?" The implications hit me like a physical blow. "You think one of us has to stay for the other to leave?" Kate didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled out her notebook and flipped to the page where she'd drawn the blood symbols from my arm. "Daniel said this marks you as the vessel. They want you, specifically. So I'm trapped no matter what," I said bleakly. "No." She shook her head firmly. "We'll find another way. There has to be another way." Before I could respond, something crashed in the woods nearby, a heavy, deliberate sound that couldn't be mistaken for an animal. We both froze, listening intently. More sounds followed, branches breaking, undergrowth being trampled, something large moving through the forest with no attempt at stealth. "Rule 1, Kate whispered. "Stay in the tent until dawn." But what was approaching didn't sound like it would respect the thin barrier of our tent. The noises circled our campsite, drawing closer with each pass. I clutched my father's knife, knowing it would be useless against whatever was out there, but needing something solid to hold on to. The sounds stopped directly outside our tent. In the abrupt silence, I could hear liquid dripping onto the ground. Pat, 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 like the wet footsteps from the night before. "Ryan Cooper," a voice called. Not Kate's voice this time, but one I recognized all too well. My father's voice. "Dad," I whispered before I could stop myself. Kate squeezed my arm painfully. "Don't answer," she hissed. "Rule 3, "Son, I need your help," my father's voice continued, the familiar tones sending a wave of longing through me. "I'm hurt. Please come out." My father had died 3 years ago. Cancer that spread too quickly for treatment to make a difference. The thing outside was not him. Could not be him. Yet the voice brought back memories so vivid they made my chest ache. "Ryan, please," it pleaded, using the exact tone my father had used when he needed help getting from bed to bathroom in his final weeks. "I can't do this alone." I bit down hard on my knuckles, fighting the instinctive urge to respond, to help. Kate wrapped her arms around me, pressing her forehead against my shoulder. "It's not him," she whispered. "Remember the rules." The voice changed tactics. "Ryan, I know you're in there. Don't you want to see me again? Don't you have questions you never got to ask? I can answer them all." A pause. "I'm so proud of you, son." Tears burned in my eyes. There were so many things I'd never said to my father. So many conversations cut short by his rapid decline. The temptation to respond, to pretend just for a moment. "Kate," I whispered, my voice strangled. "I can't." "Focus on my voice," she said firmly. "Just my voice. Tell me about your favorite memory with your real dad." I closed my eyes, concentrating on the warmth of Kate beside me, using her voice as an anchor. "Fishing," I said hoarsely. "We went to this lake in Maine when I was 10. It rained a whole weekend, but we stayed out anyway. He taught me how to cast, how to be patient." Outside, my father's voice called again, more insistent now. I kept talking, drowning it out with real memories. He made terrible coffee on the camp stove, burnt and too strong, but we drank it anyway, huddled under a tarp while the rain came down. I swallowed hard. He told me stories about when he was a kid, adventures he'd had. I think half of them were made up, but I didn't care. The thing outside grew angry, my father's gentle tones giving way to a frustrated snarl that no human throat could produce. It paced around the tent, testing the salt line. Where it encountered the barrier, I heard a hissing sound, like water on hot metal. "The salt's working," Kate whispered. Gradually, the creature retreated, its wet footsteps fading into the forest. We sat in tense silence for several minutes, listening for any sign of its return. "I'm sorry," Kate said finally. "About your dad. That was cruel, using his voice." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. It had been cruel and effective. If Kate hadn't been there. "They're getting desperate," she continued, checking her watch. "It's 10:42. Less than an hour and a half until midnight. And Daniel hasn't come back," I added, my earlier suspicions resurfacing. "Maybe he's not coming. Then we'll handle this ourselves." Kate's voice was stronger than I'd expected. She pulled her backpack closer and began emptying it methodically. "We need weapons, or symbols, or something we can use to protect you." I watched as she laid out our meager supplies: a first aid kit, a multi-tool, a flashlight, matches, energy bars, water bottles. Nothing that would help against supernatural forces. "Wait," I said suddenly, reaching for the metal box that held the rules. "These boxes, they're significant somehow. The engravings, the way they keep appearing." I examined the first box more carefully, tracing the shifting patterns with my fingertip. The designs seemed to respond to my touch, flowing like liquid metal beneath my finger. "They're the same symbols," Kate said, leaning closer. "The same as the blood pattern on your arm." She was right. Now that I was looking closely, I could see the similarities. Not exact matches, but variations on the same strange alphabet. What if... I hesitated, the idea forming slowly. What if these boxes are protection, not just warnings? They appeared to help us, to give us the rules. But who left them? Kate asked. And why? Before I could respond, a quiet knock sounded on the tent flap. We both jumped. It's Daniel, a hushed voice called. Let me in, quickly. Kate and I exchanged glances. I gripped my knife tighter and nodded. She unzipped the tent. Daniel slipped inside, bringing with him the smell of earth and something acrid, like burnt herbs. He was carrying a small leather satchel and a crude spear, a sharpened stick with something metallic bound to its tip. They're gathering, he said without preamble. Every spirit, every entity that dwells in Stillwater Gap. I counted at least 7 at the lake shore. We haven't agreed to any plan yet, I said pointedly. Why should we trust you? Daniel met my gaze unflinchingly. Because I've survived here longer than anyone else. Because I know how to fight them. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small cloth bundle. And because I have this. He unwrapped the bundle to reveal a small, ancient-looking key made of the same strange metal as the boxes. It was covered in the familiar symbols, which moved and shifted across its surface. What is it? Kate asked. A key to lock the doorway they're trying to open through Ryan. Daniel handed it to me. At the midnight ritual, they'll try to complete the transformation. This key can stop it, can lock away their access to our world for another year. I turned the key over in my palm. It was unexpectedly warm, seeming to pulse with a faint heartbeat. How do I use it? There's an altar in the center of the lake, Daniel explained. A stone platform that only rises on Samhain night. When they call you, and they will call you, with a pull you won't be able to resist, you must go to the altar. But instead of lying down upon it as they'll want you to do, you must find the keyhole and use this. That's your plan? Kate asked incredulously. To send Ryan directly to them? Daniel's expression hardened. It's the only way. They've already marked him. At midnight, they'll draw him to the altar whether we like it or not. This way, at least he has a chance to turn their ritual against them. Kate shook her head vehemently. There has to be another option. What about leaving? You said there was a price. A shadow crossed Daniel's face. The price is a life. A sacrifice. Someone must stay willingly for another to leave. His eyes flicked between us. Are either of you prepared to make that choice? The question hung in the air between us, impossible to answer. I clutched the key tighter, its warmth spreading up my arm. How do I know this key actually does what you say it does? I asked. How do I know this isn't part of their plan? Daniel laughed bitterly. You don't. That's the hell of this place. You never know for sure what's real and what's manipulation. He checked his watch. It's 11:15. We need to get into position soon. Position for what? Kate demanded. I'll create a distraction, Daniel said. Draw some of them away from the lake. It might give Ryan a better chance at reaching the altar with less interference. He pulled something else from his satchel, a small glass vial filled with dark liquid. Blood from someone they've already taken. My brothers. It will attract them. The plan sounded desperate, possibly suicidal. But as midnight approached, I could feel something stirring inside me. A pull toward the lake, a whisper in my blood that grew louder with each passing minute. I was out of options. Mark or no mark, key or no key. I would be drawn to that altar when the time came. The only question was whether I'd go as a willing victim or with a plan to fight back. Okay, I said finally. I'll do it. I'll use the key. Kate started to protest, but I cut her off. They're not giving us a choice, Kate. This way, at least I'm going in prepared. Daniel nodded grimly, relief flashing across his features. We should go now, get into position before they notice us moving. As we prepared to leave the relative safety of our tent, I slipped the strange key into my pocket. Its warmth pulsed against my thigh, echoing the beat of my heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap, but whether it was the entity's trap or Daniel's remained to be seen. The rules had kept us alive so far, but as midnight approached and the final ritual loomed, I wondered if any rules would matter anymore. Whatever awaited me at the center of that black lake, I would face it with the key in my hand and Kate's voice in my heart. It was the only plan we had. The night air burned cold in my lungs as we crept toward the lake. The forest had transformed. Shadows moved with purpose between the trees. Whispers floated on the wind, and the faint smell of decay hung in the air. Breaking Rule 1, leaving our tent before dawn, felt like crossing a threshold from which there was no return. Daniel led the way, his makeshift spear held at the ready. Kate followed close behind me, clutching the metal box containing the rules. My pocket felt heavy with the key, its warmth intensifying with each step toward the water. "Stop," Daniel whispered, throwing out his arm. We froze. Ahead, at the lake's edge, dark figures moved. They were roughly human-shaped, but wrong in ways I couldn't quite define. Too tall, too fluid in their movements, their proportions subtly distorted. They seemed to be arranging items around the shore, stones, branches, small objects that gleamed dully in the darkness. "Preparations for the ritual," Daniel breathed. "They're creating the channeling circle." The figures didn't speak, but a low humming emanated from them, vibrating in my chest like the bass at a concert. The sound made my teeth ache and my vision blur at the edges. "I can feel it pulling me," I whispered, fighting the urge to step forward into their circle. Kate gripped my arm. "Fight it. Not yet. It's not midnight." Daniel checked his watch. 11:47. Almost time. He turned to us, his face ghostly in the darkness. "I'll go west, along the shore, and create the distraction. Wait until you hear me, then Ryan makes for the altar. Kate, you stay here." "No way," Kate said firmly. "I'm going with him." Daniel's expression hardened. "You'll only slow him down. Those things will be drawn to the vessel." He nodded at me. "But they'll have no qualms about taking others who get in their way." "I don't care," Kate insisted. "I'm not letting him face this alone." Before Daniel could argue further, the humming from the lake shore changed pitch, becoming deeper, more resonant. The dark figures stopped moving and turned as one to face the center of the lake. The black water began to churn, though there was no wind. Slowly, impossibly, the center of the lake rose up, water flowing away to reveal a stone platform emerging from the depths. The altar. It was a simple structure. A rectangular slab of stone supported by 4 pillars, all covered in the same shifting symbols that decorated the boxes and the key. As it cleared the water's surface, the platform began to glow with an eerie blue light. The pull I'd felt before intensified tenfold. It was no longer just a whisper in my blood, but a screen, a command, an irresistible force drawing me toward the altar. I took an involuntary step forward before Kate's grip on my arm anchored me. "Not yet," Daniel hissed. "Wait for my signal." He slipped away into the darkness, circling west along the shore. The dark figures, I couldn't bring myself to call them people, continued their humming, swaying gently now, their attention fixed on the glowing altar. "Ryan," Kate whispered, her face pale with fear. "If this goes wrong—" "It won't," I said with more confidence than I felt. "But if it does," she persisted, "I need you to know that I love you, and I'm not leaving without you." My throat tightened. "Kate." "No arguments," she cut me off. "Where you go, I go. That's the deal." Before I could respond, A commotion erupted from the western shore. Daniel's voice rose in a strange, guttural chant, and a red glow flared in the darkness. The distraction. Several of the dark figures broke away from the circle, moving with unnatural speed toward the source of the disruption. The others remained, their humming never faltering. "Now," Kate urged. "Go!" I could no longer fight the pull anyway. The key in my pocket burned hot against my thigh as I stepped from the cover of the trees and moved toward the shore. Kate followed close behind, her footsteps nearly silent on the forest floor. The remaining figures sensed our approach. They turned, their faces, if they could be called faces, rippling like disturbed water. But they made no move to stop me. Instead, they parted, creating a path to the water's edge. They want me to reach the altar, I realized. They need me there for the ritual. As my feet touched the cold water of the lake, I expected resistance, remembering Rule 2. Do not swim in the lake. Do not touch the water. But nothing happened. The water simply parted before me, creating a dry pathway to the glowing altar. Kate gasped behind me but continued to follow. The figures flanked our path now, their humming growing more intense, more focused. I could feel their anticipation like a physical weight. My hand closed around the key in my pocket. It was scorching hot now, almost too painful to touch, but I held on. This small piece of metal was our only hope. When we reached the altar, the humming stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, I could hear Kate's ragged breathing behind me and, distantly, shouting from where Daniel had created his distraction. The altar glowed blue before me, its surface inscribed with a complex pattern of the same shifting symbols. In the center was a clearly defined depression in the shape of a human body. My body, I somehow knew. And beside it was a small, keyhole-shaped opening. "I see it," I whispered to Kate. "The keyhole. Do it," she urged, "before they stop you." I pulled the key from my pocket. It glowed with the same blue light as the altar, the symbols on its surface moving more rapidly now, aligning with the pattern on the stone. The figures began to close in, their humming resuming at a higher, more urgent pitch. Time was running out. My watch beeped. Midnight. The moment it did, everything changed. The figures around us threw back their heads and released a sound that was part shriek, part song. The water of the lake rose up in a wall around the altar, cutting off any path of retreat. And most terrifying of all, the altar itself began to transform. The symbol-covered stone liquefied, flowing like mercury but retaining its shape. The body-shaped depression deepened, and from it rose tendrils of the same fluid stone, reaching for me. "Ryan!" Kate screamed as one of the tendrils wrapped around my ankle. I lunged for the keyhole, the ancient key extended before me. The tendril yanked hard, pulling my feet from under me. I fell, my chin cracking against the stone, but kept my arm outstretched, desperate to reach the keyhole before I was dragged into the depression. More tendrils emerged, wrapping around my legs, my waist, pulling me inexorably toward the center of the altar. The key was still inches from the keyhole. Kate grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back, but the force was too strong. One of the figures broke from the circle and moved toward her with frightening speed. "Kate, look out!" I yelled. She turned just in time to see the figure reaching for her. In a desperate move, she swung the metal box containing the rules, striking the figure's head. It recoiled with a sound like tearing fabric. Using the momentary distraction, I gave one final lunge toward the keyhole. The tip of the key found its mark, sliding into the opening with a satisfying click. Everything stopped. The tendrils froze mid-motion. The humming cut off. Even the wall of water surrounding us seemed suspended in time. Then the key began to turn on its own, rotating slowly clockwise. With each fraction of turn, The symbols on the altar glowed brighter. The figures around us shuddered and writhed as if in pain. When the key completed its rotation, a wave of energy pulsed outward from the altar. The tendrils that had been grasping me disintegrated into dust. The figures surrounding us let out a collective wail of rage and despair. I scrambled to my feet, pulling Kate close. "What's happening?" Before she could answer, Daniel appeared at the edge of the water wall, his face bloody, his clothes torn. "You did it!" he shouted over the wailing. "You've locked them out. The doorway is closing." The altar beneath our feet began to tremble, the blue glow fading. The water wall collapsed, splashing back into the lake. All around us, the figures were dissolving, their forms breaking apart like smoke and wind. "We need to get off this thing now," Daniel yelled. "It's sinking back into the lake." I grabbed Kate's hand and we ran, splashing through the shallow water toward the shore. Behind us, the altar shuddered and began to descend, taking the key with it. We reached the shore just as a tremendous crack split the night air. Turning back, we saw the altar break apart, its pieces tumbling into the depths of the lake. The blue glow vanished, plunging us into darkness. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was our heavy breathing and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. "Is it over?" Kate finally asked, her voice small in the darkness. Daniel was staring at the now peaceful lake, his expression unreadable. "For now," he said softly. "Until next Samhain." "What does that mean?" I demanded. "Can we leave now?" Daniel turned to me, his eyes reflecting the faint starlight that now penetrated the clearing. "You've disrupted their ritual, bought us time." A strange smile crossed his face. "But Stillwater Gap still keeps what it claims." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. "You said there was a price to leave, a sacrifice." "Yes." Daniel nodded slowly. "Someone must stay willingly for another to leave." Kate's grip on my hand tightened. "We're not separating," she said firmly. "Either we both go, or we both stay." Daniel's smile widened, becoming almost predatory. "Noble sentiment, but I don't think you understand." He stepped closer, his form seeming to blur slightly at the edges. "I've been here for 27 years. I've paid my price over and over. And now..." He looked up at the night sky, drawing a deep breath as if tasting freedom. "Now it's someone else's turn to keep the rules." With growing horror, I realized what he was saying. "You're leaving." "At dawn," he confirmed, "when the old rules allow it." "And we're staying," Kate said flatly. "Both of us." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "That's your choice to make. The path out will appear for one at dawn. For me. Next year, perhaps, for one of you." He glanced at the lake. "If you survive that long." He turned and began walking back toward the forest. Over his shoulder, he called, "Better get back to your tent. Rule 1 still applies, and there are hours yet until dawn." We watched him disappear into the darkness, the implications of his words settling over us like a shroud. "He planned this all along," Kate whispered. "Used us to disrupt the ritual so he could finally leave." I nodded numbly. "And now we're stuck here. For a year at least." Kate took my face in her hands, forcing me to look at her. "We survived tonight. We'll survive the year." Her eyes were fierce with determination. "We know the rules now." As we made our way back to our tent, exhausted and shaken, I couldn't help but wonder what other rules we'd discover in the coming days and months. What other horrors Stillwater Gap had in store for us. The key had locked one doorway, but I feared it had opened another. A year-long nightmare in this place where reality bent and broke according to ancient, inhuman patterns. And somewhere in the darkness behind us, I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of a child's laughter. We huddled in our tent, soaked and shivering, as the hours crawled toward dawn. Neither of us could sleep. The knowledge that we were now trapped in Stillwater Gap, possibly for a year, possibly forever, hung between us like a physical presence. "I keep thinking about Daniel," Kate said finally, breaking the long silence. 27 years. How is that even possible? I had been wondering the same thing. Daniel hadn't looked old enough to have been trapped here for nearly 3 decades. Time might work differently here, I suggested. Or maybe the place preserves you somehow. Preserves you for what? Her voice cracked on the question. I had no answer for that. The memory of the altar's tendrils wrapping around my legs, pulling me toward that body-shaped depression, was still too vivid. Whatever entities controlled Stillwater Gap, they clearly needed human vessels for some purpose. "Do you think he was telling the truth?" Kate asked. "About a path appearing at dawn?" "I don't know." I checked my watch. 5:23 a.m. But we'll find out soon. We fell silent again, listening to the sounds of the night. The forest had returned to its unnatural quiet after the chaos of the ritual. No insects chirping, no owls hooting, no rustling of nocturnal creatures. Just stillness. "Ryan," Kate said suddenly, her voice tight with alarm. "Look." She was pointing at the tent floor between us. A small puddle had formed, water seeping up through the ground sheet. As we watched, the puddle expanded, the water rising faster. "It's coming from the lake," I said, scrambling to my feet. "We need to move, now." We grabbed our backpacks and burst out of the tent, just as water flooded in, soaking our sleeping bags. Outside, the forest was still dark, but a faint grayness on the eastern horizon promised approaching dawn. The entire campsite was flooding, water rising from the ground, as if the very earth were dissolving beneath our feet. We retreated to higher ground, watching as our tent collapsed, submerged in the rising water. "They're angry," Kate whispered, clutching my arm. "The ritual failed and they're angry." The water continued to rise, following us as we backed further up the slope. It didn't behave like normal water. It moved with purpose, seeking us out, flowing uphill against gravity. "The rules," I said suddenly. "Where's the box?" Kate patted her jacket pocket. "Here." I grabbed it when we left the tent. "Check if there's anything about flooding, about water chasing us." She pulled out the box and opened it, hands trembling as she unfolded the second set of rules. "Nothing specific," she said after scanning it. "Just Rule 2, don't touch the water." The water was still advancing, now only yards away from our position. The trees around us creaked and groaned, their roots undermined by the flood. One massive pine tilted slowly, then crashed down with a thunderous impact. "The hollow tree," Kate exclaimed. "Rule 2 from the second set. When birds fall silent during daylight, find the hollow tree and shelter within until they sing again." "It's not quite daylight," I pointed out. "And the birds haven't fallen silent. They were never singing to begin with." "It's our best shot," Kate insisted, pulling me toward the forest. "Do you remember where it was?" I tried to orient myself. "East, I think. Past those 3 pines in a row." We ran, splashing through shallow puddles that seemed to grab at our ankles. The water was everywhere now, turning the forest floor into a swamp. Behind us, I could hear larger bodies of water moving through the trees, pursuing us with unnatural determination. The eastern sky grew lighter. Dawn was minutes away. There. Kate pointed to a massive oak ahead. It was the hollow tree we'd sheltered in before, its gaping wound in the trunk beckoning like a sanctuary. We sprinted the final distance, water splashing around our knees now. As we reached the tree, I glanced back. A wave was forming in the flooded forest, rising up like a wall, poised to crash down upon us. "Get in!" I shouted, pushing Kate into the hollow trunk. I dove in after her just as the wave struck the tree with concussive force. Water poured through the opening, soaking us, but the tree held firm. Inside, the space seemed larger than I remembered, and the wood still radiated that unnatural warmth. "Do you feel that?" Kate whispered. I nodded. The tree was vibrating slightly, a subtle tremor running through the wood. It felt almost like a heartbeat. Outside, water continued to batter the tree, seeking entrance. But as the minutes passed, the assault gradually lessened. Through the opening, I could see the sky brightening. Dawn had arrived, and with it came birdsong. A single chirp at first, then another, then a chorus. Real birds with natural voices. The water receded as quickly as it had appeared, sinking back into the earth as if it had never been. When the forest floor was merely damp rather than flooded, we cautiously emerged from the hollow tree. The forest looked different in the dawn light, more normal somehow. The oppressive atmosphere temporarily lifted. Even the air felt cleaner, easier to breathe. "Let's find Daniel," I said. "See if he was telling the truth about a path appearing." We made our way back toward our ruined campsite, following the stone markers we'd left the previous day. The lake came into view, its surface now placid and reflective, showing only the normal images of trees and sky above. Daniel was waiting at the shore, a small pack slung over his shoulder. His appearance had changed overnight. His beard was neatly trimmed, his clothes clean and dry. He looked younger, the haunted expression gone from his eyes. "You survived," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "Good for you." "No thanks to you," Kate replied coldly. Daniel shrugged. "I did what I had to do. 27 years is a long time to be trapped in one place." He gazed out at the lake. "The ritual fails every Samhain. There's always someone marked, always an attempt, always a failure. It's part of the cycle." "What cycle?" I demanded. "Stillwater Gap's cycle. Its feeding pattern, if you will." Daniel turned back to us, his expression serious for once. "It doesn't just want bodies, you know. It wants hope, fear, desperation. It wants to watch us struggle against the rules, bend under their weight, break or survive." He smiled thinly. "It's all a game to whatever lives here." "So this whole place is... what?" "Sentient?" Kate asked. "In a way. Not like you or me, but aware. Purposeful." Daniel checked his watch. "It's time. The path only appears for a few minutes at dawn after Samhain." As if on cue, a section of the forest behind him changed. The trees didn't move, but the space between them altered, revealing a clear pathway where moments before there had been only dense underbrush. Through this opening, I could see what looked like the main hiking trail we'd originally followed into Stillwater Gap. "That's it," Daniel said, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "That's the way out." He started toward the opening, then paused, turning back to us. Some remnant of humanity flickered in his eyes. "Look, I'm sorry it worked out this way, but you've got the rules. You know what to expect now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. "Here, my observations from 27 years. Might help you survive until next Samhain." He tossed the notebook onto the ground between us. Neither Kate nor I moved to pick it up. "One more thing," Daniel said. "The third box will appear at the winter solstice. More rules. Always more rules." He smiled grimly. "That's how it works here. The longer you stay, the more rules you need to survive. With that, he turned and walked toward the opening. As he stepped through, his form seemed to waver, like heat rising from pavement. For just a moment, I thought I saw something else walking in his place. Something not entirely human. Then he was gone, and the path closed behind him. Trees and undergrowth seamlessly filling the space, as if the opening had never existed. Kate let out a slow breath. Do you think he's really free? Or is this just another part of the game? I bent down and picked up Daniel's notebook. It was water-stained and worn, the pages filled with cramped writing, diagrams, and what looked like tallies of days. I don't know, but I think we need to assume we're on our own now. We turned and looked at the ruins of our campsite. Our tent was destroyed, most of our supplies soaked or washed away. The only things we had left were what we'd carried in our backpacks during the midnight ritual. The metal boxes with the rules, Kate's notebook, my father's knife, and a few energy bars. We need to find shelter, Kate said pragmatically, someplace more permanent than a tent. I nodded, thinking of the cabin we'd glimpsed during our attempts to leave the day before. And we need to map this place, learn its boundaries, its patterns. Learn all the rules, Kate added softly. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the clearing. In the daylight, Stillwater Gap looked almost ordinary, a beautiful remote camping spot in the mountains. But we knew better. We had seen what lurked beneath its tranquil surface. As we gathered what remained of our belongings, I found myself wondering how long we would last here. Would we survive until next Samhain? Would one of us make it out, leaving the other behind? Or would we both eventually join whatever had been following the rules long before we arrived? The metal box in Kate's pocket caught the morning light, its strange engravings momentarily aligning into a pattern that almost made sense. Almost. Come on, I said, taking her hand. Let's go find that cabin. As we walked away from the lake, I felt eyes on my back, not human eyes, but something older, patient, and endlessly hungry. Something that had all the time in the world to watch us struggle against its rules. Something that had claimed us as its own. The cabin walls were covered in rules. We'd written them everywhere. Carved into the wooden beams, painted on scraps of fabric, scratched onto metal sheets. 365 days of rules, each one more specific and strange than the last. Don't sleep with your head pointing north on the waning moon. When the lake turns red, recite the names of everyone you've ever loved. If you see yourself in the forest, run in the opposite direction. The third box had arrived at the winter solstice, just as Daniel had said. Then the fourth at the spring equinox. The fifth at the summer solstice. Each with its own set of rules, each more critical to our survival than the last. Kate sat at our makeshift table, carefully copying the blood symbols that had appeared on her arm that morning. Mine had stopped appearing months ago, after the entities realized I had disrupted their ritual. Now they wanted her instead. How much longer? She asked without looking up. I checked my watch, our last reliable connection to the world we'd left behind. 2 hours until sunset. Then we'll know. Today was October 31st. Samhain. 1 year since we'd found the first metal box with its list of life-saving rules. We'd survived things I can barely bring myself to describe. The collector who stalked the woods during the February snow. The children's voices that called from beneath the floorboards during the spring floods. The doppelgangers who tried to replace us in August, wearing our faces like masks. But we'd followed the rules, all of them, even when they contradicted each other, even when they seemed impossible. Do you think it'll appear for both of us? Kate asked, finally meeting my eyes. I took her hand, tracing the scar where the thing in the hollow tree had bitten her in March. I don't know, but either way, we decided. Both or neither. She nodded, returning to her copying work. We'd learned the hard way that every rule mattered, every symbol had meaning. Outside the cabin window, the lake waited, black and still. Soon the altar would rise again. Soon we would know if our year of rule following had earned us passage out of Stillwater Gap. Or if, like Daniel before us, we would become part of the cycle. Guardians of the rules, keepers of the boxes, luring others into the trap so that one day we might escape. I picked up the metal box that had started it all, its engravings now familiar as old friends. Inside, the yellowed paper with the first 7 rules seemed almost laughably simple compared to what had come after. As the sun began to sink toward the mountains, I added one final rule to our wall, one we had written ourselves. Never look back once you've left Stillwater Gap. What follows might not be who you were. It was the most important rule of all, of